Arrived at Young-soo's house, or rather, to what was once his home. Now it's a ruin. Kim Jong-yum and Young-soo had reached their destination. Looking at it from afar, the apartment complex was in extremely poor condition. The structure was already old, and the attacks had nearly demolished it. The surrounding buildings suffered the same fate. The whole district was not built to withstand a monster apocalypse after all. There were remnants of buildings and debris cluttering the road, but oddly enough, no corpses could be seen littering the ground. The view was very different from the main street, where bodies were scattered all over the place. The duo entered one of the crumbling buildings, and Young-soo faced his home's door for the first time in a while. His hand trembled at the thought of his family on the other side of the entryway. He just needed to press the number, open the door, and go inside. Those were 3 simple steps, but he couldn't bring himself to move his hand to the keypad out of debilitating fear. Jong-yum watched from behind. He could see that his new buddy was having an impossibly hard time opening the door. Young-soo had stepped on the gas so hard that they covered a distance that should have taken an hour in less than 20 minutes. That was how eager he was to see his family again. He drove to this area, fueled by thoughts of his wife and kid. But if he had to face a cold corpse inside their home, he might not be able to handle it. There was no way he could open that door, no matter how much resolve he had. Anyone would be stunned at the thought of the worst-case scenario. Jong-yum reckoned it would be best if he took the lead and opened the door instead. He tapped Young-soo on the shoulder, and he tensed up. Our boy asked if he could press the doorbell for Young-soo's sake instead. At first, the S-tier driver didn't know whether to accept or not, but he eventually accepted Jong-yum's kind offer. No one would want to confirm their family's death, especially in this uncertain era of instability. If Jong-yum were in Young-soo's position, he'd rather have someone else open the door, even if there was only a 1% chance of seeing his loved ones lifeless. Finally, Jong-yum pressed the doorbell, and they waited with bated breath. As it turned out, he didn't even have to knock or press the bell. A person inside the house slowly opened the entrance. The duo turned to the door as they heard it creak open. Young-soo's eyes widened as he stared at the person opening the door to his home. His wife and little girl stood at the entryway, seemingly waiting for him all this time. When she saw her husband, who hadn't come back throughout the confusing and tumultuous descent of monsters, she couldn't believe her eyes. Young-soo's tears finally escaped. He felt the joy and relief of seeing his family alive after dreading the possibility of never seeing them again. He quickly ran toward his wife and daughter, covering them in a tight, loving embrace. Jong-yum watched the heartfelt reunion from the sidelines. He was happy his new buddy got a good ending. They didn't even have to knock or ring the doorbell. Young-soo's wife just knew she had to open it. She heard a noise and looked through the peephole to see her husband. While he thanked every deity for keeping his family safe, Young-soo's daughter clung to her father, crying and telling him she hated him for making them worry so much. After a few minutes of sobbing, Young-soo's wife finally noticed another person standing in the hallway. Young-soo introduced Jong-yum as the benefactor who helped him get back safely. At that moment, our boy's vision turned blurry as his world spun, and everything went black. He fell, lost strength in his legs, and started to lose consciousness for unknown reasons. Young-soo worriedly called out his name, but he looked way too dazed. The last thing Jong-yum saw was the hazy silhouette of Young-soo and his family. He knew he shouldn't be losing consciousness here and now, but it was out of his control. What little light remained faded, and he couldn't take it anymore. Jong-yum's mind drifted to a distant memory when he curiously asked his dad why he wasn't crying. Dad just looked at him reassuringly and explained that parting with loved ones didn't bring only sadness. All kinds of emotions come to mind. You inevitably remember all the time spent together. It was the day of Grandma's funeral, and Dad felt affection, gratitude, regret, longing, a wide array of emotions. He firmly believed farewells didn't need to be solely sad. Upon reflecting, Dad felt more gratitude than sadness. Gratitude for being shown the true essence of love. His mother had given him a heart that cared without expecting anything in return. It would be difficult for a child to understand now, but one day, as time passed and Jong-yum gained more life experience, he would realize the same thing. Dad firmly believed his little boy would understand that giving and receiving love would never be easy. From the memory of his grandma's funeral, Jong-yum's subconscious brought him to a more playful one. He was transported to the days when his sister would beat him mercilessly with pillows. She weaponized pillows and proudly beat her brother to the ground. It always ended with him crying from the pain, sometimes with a matching injury on his face. His sister was ruthless, though. She insisted she didn't even hit him hard. She even used the pillow to soften the blow, yet he cried like a baby. Little crybaby Jong-yum ran to snitch on Dad while his sister celebrated her victory. Once again, Kim Sol had successfully defended the household's championship title. The siblings bickered and fought a lot, but from Dad's perspective, they were as thick as thieves. Dad always lectured them about how, despite resenting and annoying one another now, the day would come when they'd realize just how precious family is and what love truly feels like. Then, Mom would come and lecture her husband about yapping and not helping her prepare dinner. That night, Jonghyum remembered how good the piping hot stew looked on the dining table. The whole family sat at the dining table while Juyeon was busy fiddling with her phone. Mom asked if she was texting a crush, but that's just how middle school girls act. They can't go one day without texting their friends. On TV, a professional fight, personally curated by Kim Sol, was playing. Mom couldn't even watch her dramas, with the feisty little girl hogging the TV. Given that Sol was going to middle school next year, she thought of trying out for the boxing or combat sports club. She even picked a school with the best sports program. At that time, middle school was still a distant concept for little Jonghyum. Years passed, and he finally graduated from primary school and joined the same middle school his sister attended. He looked at the welcome banner for freshmen and breathed in the air of his first day. Jonghyum awkwardly looked around, surrounded by unfamiliar faces. He watched as some kids laughed and walked together to their respective classes. He could still picture how neat and radiant their new uniforms looked. Jonghyum couldn't help but compare himself to his better-off classmates. While they wore new, perfectly fitted uniforms, he had to wear an old, used one that looked way too big for his lanky frame. Despite the stark difference between his jacket and theirs, young Jonghyum still smiled and held his head high. It's just a school uniform after all. What a young Chad. His positive outlook on middle school quickly faded when he became a target for lowlifes. He tried to do the right thing and defend a bullied classmate against some delinquent upperclassmen. All it got him was countless cruel stomps as he desperately protected his head from senseless violence. Just as one of the delinquents was about to hit him in the face, a firm grip stopped the bastard cold. It was Kim Sol. She'd gone through a growth spurt and had been training with the school's club for a while now. She looked down at the delinquent like she was looking at an ant. Kim Sol easily dispatched the delinquents, who had been hassling her little brother. Afterwards, she turned to Jonghyum and enlisted him into her club. From then on, he was required to join the morning exercise. He thought he was just getting bailed out by his monstrous sister, but that was far from the truth. Little Jonghyum was subjected to a hellish training regimen designed by his sadistic older sister every single day. He kept up with this routine, met some good friends, and continued to live a peaceful and vibrant middle school life. A few years later, their eldest sister, Juyeon, got accepted into a prestigious nursing school. Their mom, dad, and siblings could not believe their eyes. Jonghyum kept up his training a few years after that. Can you see those gains, bro? At that time, a life-changing letter arrived in the mail. He read the snail mail sent by the government with terror on his face. It was time for him to fulfill his mandatory military enlistment notice. Mom waved goodbye, Dad stood proud, and Saul laughed at his new look as they sent him off to training camp. He had to shave his head. He looked pretty good with a buzz cut, though. Mom yelled at him to come back safely and avoid getting hurt. Dad simply told him to never be discouraged, no matter what happened. Along with the other bald boys enlisting, Jonghyum walked with his head held high. He could still hear his family cheering him on as he walked toward the military camp's entrance. Once he was far enough that they couldn't see his face, Jonghyum's tears finally came pouring down. He loved his family. He loved how supportive they were and how much they loved him in return. His memories shifted into dreams, and his dreams ended as he slowly opened his eyes. To his surprise, he was lying down on a soft futon in an unfamiliar room. He sat up looking around in a panic. Not recognizing his surroundings, he began to sweat profusely. The last thing he remembered was fainting near the doorway. He could recall Yongsoo meeting his family, but the memory felt a little hazy. Just to be safe, he instinctively reached for an axe from Pax. Jonghyum was startled when a voice from behind asked if he had slept well. He turned around to see Yongsoo's wife and daughter sitting at the dining table, peacefully eating their meal. Both of them looked at him with puzzled expressions as he stood there, axe in hand. Jonghyum was frozen in place, unsure of what to do as he awkwardly stared at them. He was still reeling from his heartfelt dream and did not know what was happening or what to say in this situation. Scanning the room, he saw Yongsoo sleeping soundly, not far from his futon. Yongsoo's wife worriedly asked Jonghyum if he was okay. He had just suddenly collapsed and fallen asleep like a baby outside. He was so zonked out that they didn't want to wake him. Realizing he was in a safe environment, he felt terrible for immediately reaching for his axe like a cornered animal. He quietly threw the thing back into his private dimension and asked how long he had been out. He hadn't even slept that long, just knocked out for about 3 hours. Also, Yongsoo had already told his wife everything that happened. He wouldn't stop talking about how much of a help Jonghyum had been in getting home in one piece. For that, Mrs. Yongsoo was thankful. If it weren't for this young man, she might never have seen her husband again. The sincerity of her words made him feel awkward, as he insisted that Yongsoo also helped him a lot. At that moment, the suave driver woke up and insisted that, in comparison to the help he received, he couldn't say he'd done much at all. Jonghyum had saved his life multiple times after all. Mrs. Yongsoo invited the boys to have a meal before they talked. Mr. Yongsu insisted on waiting for Jong-yum to wake up to eat together, so he had been napping. With a warm and relaxed smile on his face, Yongsu invited the young man to the dining table. Jong-yum returned the warm smile with one of his own. As soon as he sat at the table, he was greeted by a freshly made, piping hot homemade meal glistening under the light. It was a conger eel stew. Jong-yum was not expecting to be served such a lavish meal when the apocalypse had been raging for days. Mrs. Yongsu hoped the stew would suit his taste as she wanted to treat her husband's savior to something a little more generous than usual. But with limited ingredients, this stew was the best she could make. Jong-yum wasn't lying when he said there was no more luxurious meal than this. Since Mrs. Yongsu and her little girl had already eaten, she left the boys to eat their fill. He found it a little odd that she would go as far as to leave the room, but the food in front of him looked too good to think about anything else. He took a spoonful of the stew, making sure to get a little bit of everything in that sucker. When he put that thing in his mouth, it felt like he was ascending to the high heavens. It tasted so good he reached enlightenment. It looked like he had tasted the nectar of the gods. The taste brought on a bright sensation and a surge of emotion. The vast and diverse flavors of the stew unfolded on the tip of his tongue. He couldn't figure out how Mrs. Yongsu managed to balance the sweet and oily taste of stir-fried kimchi. What lingered in his mouth was the clean, savory taste of mackerel and the kick of kimchi. Despite the rich and complex taste profiles, somehow it felt cozy, like it was made with a ton of love. Bro went full-on food wars on that stew. He finished the bowl and respectfully put the spoon down on the table. Both Jong-yum and Yongsu had been eating convenient foods from packs, so warming their stomachs with a homemade meal felt life-changing. It made our boy contemplative about his life. Since the world ended up like this? No. Ever since he left the military 3 months ago, this conger eel stew had been the best meal he'd had. It was almost comparable to his mother's kimchi stew. His thoughts were interrupted by Yongsu's question. If he remembers correctly, Jong-yum was supposed to cut through the Gangnam area. Without a hint of hesitation, Yongsu offered to drive him there. This left the young man confused. Yongsu asserted that he had already discussed his plans with his wife. When he told her that Jong-yum was on a quest to find his family, she insisted that Jong-yum's family mattered too. But Gangnam wouldn't be his final destination. The trip would take much longer as he planned to go to Uijeongbu, and he'd need the vehicle for a lot longer. Yongsu had already thought about that, so he laid out his conditions. But first, they should take this conversation outside. The sun was about to set and the sky looked gorgeous. Yongsu gave Jong-yum the rundown of the plan to use the truck to reach Gangnam. Once the drive was over, he would return to his family using an electric bicycle. That was also the condition he wanted to bring up. He wanted to have the electric bicycle for personal use. Even though he felt a little weird asking for the bike, he still wanted to be of help. If it was okay with the young man, Yongsu would gladly drive him to Gangnam as fast as humanly possible. Jong-yum understood the plan. It was pretty simple after all. But something wasn't clicking quite right. Why would a family man, just reunited with his loved ones, take on such a high-risk mission? Of course, with his driving skills, he could probably outrun most monsters with ease and immaculate style. But aside from his driving skills, he would still be putting himself in grave danger. Yongsu had just won the game. His family was alive. They had food and supplies in the cargo hold, so there was no reason to make such a risky move for a stranger. Curious about his reasoning, Jong-yum outright asked what was going through the family man's head. Why would he stick his neck out trying to help someone he just met? Well, his reasoning was as simple as it gets. Jong-yum had saved him before and helped him get back to his wife and kid. Wasn't it only fair that he returned the favor? Also, he asked why Jong-yum helped him in the first place. The young man tried to think of an answer, but he couldn't. He had acted out of the goodness of his heart. Yongsu was well aware that he wouldn't have survived or made it this far without Jong-yum. Maybe he wouldn't have even escaped the tunnel and might have died a miserable death. So, he just wanted to try returning the favor and give as much help in return as he could. Moreover, they were actually in the same situation if you thought about it. Sure, Jong-yum had awakened a brokenly overpowered ability, but that didn't mean the journey would be easy. Even though the world was in ruins, people still held on to the hope that their families were safe. Right now, Jong-yum was just another survivor trying to stay strong in the same difficult situation. Wouldn't it be nice if they just helped each other? Even though Yongsu felt presumptuous, given that all he could offer was his driving skills, he still wanted to give this partnership a shot. He assured the young man that if things took a turn for the worse, he would flee to safety without hesitation. He wasn't foolish enough to risk his life or his family. For some reason, Jong-yum recalled pedaling toward the tunnel full of wyverns as the survivors cheered him on and wished him luck. On the way to the tunnel, he spotted a car with the key still in the ignition. This could have solved his problems right then and there. But at the end of the day, he chose to continue pedaling forward for the sake of the other people relying on him. He gave up the easy way out in hopes of saving more lives. Reminiscing about that not-so-distant memory made him smile. He didn't regret going down that route. Yongsoo was still pitching his plan to the young man, unsure if Jongyum would agree. Jongyum then explained that his subspace ability was a space where nothing could enter without his permission. As long as the subspace was maintained, he could even duplicate items from the storage facility endlessly. Yongsoo already knew that much though. If he really wanted to help, Jongyum proposed one more condition. First, they would have to cut through Gangnam, Yuljiro, Dobonggu, and finally, Uijeongbu. He wanted Yongsoo to drive him all the way to the last stop until they found Jongyum's entire family. Second, the young man reckoned he wouldn't be able to accomplish the mission alone. However, upon leveling up, the subspace would be open to harboring other people inside. That could include Yongsoo's family. Jongyum opened his subspace and insisted that if the man of the house was going, his entire family should come too. Thanks to wiping out the monster dog population in the city, he finally had enough mana crystals to level up the subspace. If Yongsoo continued helping Jongyum find his family, he would gladly protect the girls too. Yongsoo was equally shocked and amused by yet another crazy feature of the young man's ability. He coolly removed his aviator glasses and agreed to bring his wife and daughter on this deadly road trip across the country. Hell, they could head out right here and now. With his current stockpile of 116 mana stones, he could spend 100 to upgrade to a level 2 subspace, leaving him with 16 in the bank. Upon confirmation, the system booted up the upgrade sequence seamlessly. The upgrade was successful, and level 2 was achieved. The maintenance costs were also adjusted from 1 mana stone a day to a whopping 6 every 24 hours. At least the capacity had been expanded to accommodate up to 20 people at once. An additional ability that allowed the user to store items in front of him had also been added. Sure, the maintenance cost of 6 mana stones was a bit steep, but it came with a few additional abilities and enhancements available with the upgrade. He decided to check those out later and take care of a more important matter for now. Jongyum signaled Lee Yongsoo, Lee Yoljong, and Oh Ji-soo to enter his subspace, and the system notified the host of their presence. Upon giving them permission to enter, the family went through the portal and set foot inside. 1 second they were outside a broken-down building. The next, they were transported to an entirely different space. Yongsoo's wife and kid were wide-eyed and in awe of the view in front of them. Even Yongsoo himself, who was familiar with the PAX fulfillment center, was speechless. The scale of the subspace was enormous. Shelves upon shelves of all kinds of supplies lined up left and right. Jongyum called PAX to come over and demonstrate the crux of the subspace to the family. He explained that they could just tell the friendly artificial intelligence anything they needed while staying. They could check the availability of items from PAX, and if necessary, he'd handle delivery as well. There was a fresh food center somewhere in the area where they could get all kinds of food and ingredients. Yongsoo's wife knew how precious fresh ingredients were in the apocalypse, so she was hesitant to just freely use the young man's resources. That wasn't a big deal though, as everything in this subspace was infinite. Everything could be endlessly duplicated, so there was no need to be prudent. For now, they should take a little break and head out in about 30 minutes, as he needed to consolidate and check some new things regarding his abilities. Jongyum's warm welcome cheered the family up. Yongsoo even took the opportunity to play princess with his daughter after a long time apart. Just like that, the new addition to the subspace adjusted quickly to their new life. With that taken care of, it was time to get right into business and check out the new abilities. At subspace level 2, he could now activate the subspace lab for 50 mana stones. He could open a laboratory where he could combine, classify, and transform registered items in the subspace. I bet he's about to make an axe plus refrigerator hybrid or something. As we've established, Kim Jongyum's ability is to create a subspace where he can store an object with a storage capacity of 1 item. It was initially intended to be a one-time use storage he could access whenever he wanted. Nothing could enter or exit this space unless he explicitly allowed it. This was probably the original extent of his simple ability, but that no longer seems to be the case. Due to a crazy twist of fate, he managed to place a logistics center inside. In doing so, PAX AI and the Awakening operating system merged to form something entirely different. It enhanced his ability beyond just opening and closing a subspace, resulting in many more functions than intended. A prime example of this is the shipment mechanism, allowing him to hurl items at 100 kilometers per hour. The subspace ability alone should have been impressive by itself, but after meeting PAX, it became even crazier. Jongyum wasn't expecting to gain any additional abilities upon leveling up. Here we are upgrading to level 2 and unlocking 1 more slot for his storage capacity. This meant he could store more than just the PAX fulfillment center in his subspace. On top of that, he unlocked the option to install a lab where he could manipulate items registered in his subspace. The idea of creating something by combining 2 different items was fascinating, but it required a whopping 50 magic stones to start, so that would have to wait for now. In any case, it's clear that leveling up would only make his abilities more overpowered from now on. He really wanted to check out all the new features, but he was too short on mana stones. For now, there is one thing he can confirm. When he first stored Pax FC in the subspace, Jongyum thought he had lost his mind, so he just casually blurted out the command to store the whole center without thinking twice. If it's true that he could absorb and store anything, then could he go crazy with it? When the system asked what he would like to store next, Jongyum resolutely answered that he wanted to store the entire planet Earth. He was prompted to confirm his choice, and he did. Tension filled the air as he waited for the results. After a few seconds of silence, the system informed him that it failed to store the entire planet, as the target was outside the storable range. Jongyum already figured it wouldn't work, but he had to give it a try. The ability would have been too overpowered if the command had gone through. From behind, Yongsoo approached to discuss the route they should take to reach Gangnam as quickly as possible. Yongsoo suggested taking the main road for now. Jongyum was expecting a few more minutes of rest, as Yongsoo was supposed to be playing with his daughter after being apart for so long. But they would have to save that playtime for later, as the little girl had already passed out, surrounded by all kinds of toys. She felt safe inside the subspace and fell asleep after just a little playtime. Yongsoo thanked the young man once more for everything he had done for him and his family. Humble as always, Jongyum asserted that it was no big deal, as they were simply helping each other in these tumultuous times. This filled Yongsoo with a strong sense of duty to repay Jongyum no matter what. Next thing you know, the duo was back on the cargo truck. Jongyum sat in the passenger seat and suddenly felt uneasy at the earnestness of his driver buddy. He looked at Yongsoo and his peaceful smile. Driving was the only thing Yongsoo was good at. If we're talking speed, he would confidently claim he's faster than anyone on the planet. Jongyum felt uneasy at Yongsoo's stillness and asked if they could go slowly for now. He even said, "Please." But Yongsoo was already locked in. He intended to speedrun this whole trip and make the young man experience real speed. Jongyum's tears fell as the truck sped up without warning. And so, with Yongsoo's family safe in the subspace, the boys braved the abandoned world in their speeding cargo truck. It didn't take long to reach the next leg of their journey after staying on the main road for a few minutes. They had to switch to an alternative route, which was more deserted than the main road. Luckily, there didn't seem to be many monsters roaming the area either, meaning monsters only gathered where people were. Jongyum hadn't known there was an isolated road like this on the way to Seoul. The area was supposed to be a Bronze Age archaeological site or something, so it was protected from urban development. The road was a bit tough, but they didn't have to worry about random monsters or shady people popping up. Jongyum was already drained just from sitting next to such a recklessly skillful driver. Much to Yongsoo's surprise, there seemed to be a blockade in the middle of the road. They had just left the ruined city, and this area was supposed to be an abandoned path, yet man-made deterrents cluttered the ground. If he wasn't mistaken, it looked like military barricades, complete with spike strips to stop any vehicle daring to go off-road. Maybe the military was still active in this area. Maybe there was a base nearby. That seemed like the simplest answer, but Jongyum didn't think this installation appeared here so simply. Looking through the side mirror, he spotted an armed military vehicle approaching from behind. Upon closer inspection, the driver and the others in the vehicle didn't look like they belonged to the military at all. Those guys had probably been watching the truck from a hiding spot. The duo wouldn't be able to avoid them. Jongyum proposed opening a small portal under the steering wheel, so Yongsoo could go inside with his family while he dealt with the strangers alone. If these people intended to kill them, they would have already shot at the cargo truck. Assessing the situation, Jongyum saw 3 people, all armed. The leading man hoped to see the truck's tires burst or something. When Jongyum feigned innocence and asked what was going on, the man looked at him like what was about to happen was common sense. He ordered the young man in the driver's seat to get out and open the cargo. Jongyum played along with their demands and slowly opened the cargo hold of the truck. He revealed stacks upon stacks of supply boxes, surprising the thugs posing as military personnel. Just the small pile of tuna boxes alone would be priceless in the current situation. They truly hit the jackpot. They figured the young man must be a delivery guy of some sort, and Jongyum kept up the act. The leader claimed the truck and all its contents, implicitly threatening to gun Jongyum down. As expected, they were just after food and supplies. When asked where he got the contents of the truck, the young man carefully considered his answer. He simply said he got everything from a logistics center. Technically, he wasn't lying, but he also warned them that they wouldn't find the logistics center. Besides, the only roads to it had already collapsed or been blocked, but if they needed more, he could get more. The leader looked Jongyum up and down, sizing him up. When asked about the remaining supplies in this so-called logistics center, Jongyum said what was in the truck was just a fraction of the bulk. One of the goons looked at his watch and warned the leader they were out of time. They had to wrap things up, so the captain ordered his goons to grab a hood. One of them was tasked with driving the truck, and the captain took care of Jongyum. He did so by launching a punch imbued with mysterious energy straight into Jongyum's abdomen. Caught off guard, Jung-yum gritted his teeth in pain as he slowly passed out from the blow. He folded like an omelet, and everything turned dark. When he regained consciousness, he heard the thugs calling someone "Sir" as they dragged him into a room. The captain reported what he had heard from Jung-yum about the supplies and the logistics center. Finally, the hood was taken off, and Jung-yum slowly opened his eyes, still in pain from the punch. In front of him was a burly man sitting on the other side of an office desk. A plaque on the desk bore the title Commander. The South Korean flag was proudly placed front and center. No matter how you looked at it, the man sitting at the commander's desk didn't seem like one. Furthermore, there were bloody soldier corpses on the side of the office. The thugs had brought Jung-yum to a strange place. The big boss had already heard a bit from his boys, but he wanted to hear more about this food and supplies directly from Jung-yum's lips. He wanted to know where the logistics center was. Jung-yum continued playing along, confessing that he got everything from the Gunpo Logistics Center. The big boss praised him for making a smart move. He even wished he had hit up a place like that early on. Jung-yum asked where he was and what was going on. The big boss explained they were obviously in a military base, though he couldn't remember the name of the place. From the surrounding area, Jung-yum was sure they were in a communications headquarters. The big boss had been exempt from mandatory military service, so he didn't care about the name. One quirk of this place happened every evening at 6 p.m. It would be faster if Jung-yum had just seen it for himself. When the clock hit 6, a blood-curdling scream filled the room and the entire military base. Big Boss and his men had already gotten used to these terrifying shrieks. Unsettled, Jung-yum looked out the window. He could not help but feel a bit of familiarity from the blood-curdling sound. Outside were wyverns freely roaming the skies as the sun set. There were dozens of them blocking out the light with their massive bodies and enormous wingspans. But these weren't the typical wyverns that Jung-yum was used to killing. These creatures were way too big. Big Boss could not agree more. The size of those bastards was no joke. Big Boss took great pride in his strength, but even he almost died fighting one of those scaly beasts. Weirdly enough, his attacks felt like they were being blocked by something intangible. According to the soldier with his head smashed into the wall on the side of the office, the military tried to fight those monsters with guns, and they got helplessly wiped out. If supernatural powers didn't work, there was no way ordinary bullets would. So, the military opted to recruit others to fight those monsters. Big Boss wanted to join in until he saw how strong the beasts were and how weak the military was. He did what every big boss would do and took over the entire base, ruling over the area. Well, he didn't really kill the remnants of the military force, and he didn't want to kill Jung-yum either. The young man seemed to know a lot, and the food situation in the base was horrendous. There were plenty of weapons and everything else in the communication headquarters, but what they were severely lacking was food. So, he wanted to tap into that logistics center and get some. The departure would be tomorrow morning. If Jung-yum did this for him, Big Boss promised to accept him as a member of their family. He asserted that the group could protect the young man from monsters like that oversized wyvern outside. Unfortunately for the Big Boss, Jung-yum had stopped listening to him yap for a while now. He was wondering what to put inside his subspace, and it seemed like fate had just handed him the perfect place on a silver platter. Ignoring the people around him, he spoke to Pax and requested that the Joint Command Communications headquarters be stored in the subspace. Confused by Jung-yum's words, Big Boss threatened to kill the young man. Before he could even finish his threats, his office had already vanished.